Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Pla.
Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Pla, at Andrew Pla Tech on all socials. I'll see you there. We have a very special episode in store for you today where I will be talking with recurring guest and PowerShell legend, just straight up. Ask anybody. They'll tell you that if they've been around PowerShell long enough. Fred. And we're going to be talking about key bindings and hotkeys, how to sort of improve your workflow quite a bit. And this is actually advice that Fred's given me in the past. We're going to talk about PSConfEU and our experiences and what's new with Fred's toys, right? Including EntraAuth and federated credentials. What does that all mean? Well, oh my gosh, look who I have here, Fred.
How are you everybody. Doing, man?
Hello.
I'm doing marvelously. I get to nerd out with one of my favorite fellow nerds. So what could it be better?
Exactly. We all love PowerShell in this community, and any chance we have to talk about it, we tend to take. And I think that's why I've been able to do the show weekly for so long, is because once you get the PowerShell bug, it's hard to not have that passion. When you see how it can be used and how it can help people, even before they even see it for themselves, right? When you have that advanced PowerShell perspective, you can see how it would fit their problems, even if they can't.
Yeah, it's like one of the first things I tell people when I get started in the PowerShell workshop I deliver for my customers. It's like PowerShell is what turned me from a victim into an actor. It's basically enables seeing a problem, suffering through a problem, and making it go away and stay away. It's awesome.
It really is. And I think that for a lot of people in their careers, it can have that same effect of where instead of just kind of reacting and just being, I want to say a pawn, but just kind of going through the motions of your career, you're able to take control of it and drive change in organizations and do a whole bunch of automation and have business impact and get exposure to technologies that can lead to different jobs and, you know, increase your career, change the way you approach problems. It is a very transformative technology.
It absolutely is.
You live in that space.
I can definitely say it has more than doubled my salary.
Same here, man. And I know a lot of others who are in the same boat. It's just, I think a lot of people who listen to this are earlier on in their careers, and it might be hard for them to see like, oh my gosh, how would I ever do anything like Fred does? Time and exposure, giving yourself opportunities like coming to this and learning on the podcast and PowerShell Wednesdays or other meetups that are out there or YouTube videos about PowerShell or reading books, whatever it is, you know, over time, you can accomplish really impressive things and the world is sort of your oyster.
Absolutely. There's, however, also one of a fairly common starting problem. When you're at the beginning of your career, usually you only get small problems because your seniors are not going to give you like the hard challenge right now. So at that level, the automation doesn't really scale all that well. If all you're going to do is reboot that one computer, doing a quick login and rebooting it is a lot faster than doing it with PowerShell. So seeing the value it provides in the early phases can be really hard. But it's a force multiplier long term.
It is. I had a friend of mine in the PDQ Discord PowerShell scripting channel who's learned quite a bit of PowerShell. And they actually wrote a project that addressed some printer thing they had where it would like query the toner levels for them. Some pretty cool stuff that was helpful for them and the issues they had. But now they're struggling to find ways that they can use PowerShell. What advice would you have for someone who knows some PowerShell, but maybe doesn't see all the applications?
That's a tough one, really. On the one hand, one advice, don't stop at your business challenges. There's home problems as well you can try solving with it. Even if you already know ahead of time that you're going to spend more time on it than you would be doing it manually if you're automating it at that point. Still, it's a learning experience. And if you're currently in a hole where you don't know a way forward, creating something that is a bit busy work, but still it enhances your game is already really something. The worst thing you can do to that kind of thing, especially on the early stages, is to stop using it. Because if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a language. You have to practice it to keep it, right?
Yeah. So finding something, even if it's if it's not strictly for work, is one option that really expands your scope of the whole thing. Just for example, I've written a solution to update the metadata on my music collection.
Nice. Just finding use cases.
Yeah, or I've got one of these hobbies things where I play computer games, but I don't play them for the challenge. I play them to relax. So there are some games that need some modifications to fully reflect my desire for relaxing. So I do modding. Now, here's a quick fun thing you can do with mods and PowerShell is you can do a mod release pipeline. So that when you've finished with the next version of the mod, you can just push it to where your game expects it. You might even be able to add in some automation that dynamically grabs some original game data during the build phase and modifies them before you override them, so you don't have to have a static copy of game files in your mod, which has a problem when the game ships an update. So when you click build, you grab the latest copy from the game, then do your modification, and then you place the final file in your mod as you put it where the game expects that.
Those are some advanced use cases. I'll give you that.
Yeah, it's just you can find use cases in your hobbies, in your private life as well, not just in your work. And let's be honest, most of your investment into PowerShell is going to be in your own career, not in your workplace. So the skills will stay. Even when you later, and maybe not all that much later, upgrade into a completely different job with new challenges. There, it's more obvious what you can do with PowerShell.
Yeah, and I think you kind of bring up a good thing there, which is these are your skills. When you develop them, they are yours. They don't just stay with your company, right? You take the knowledge of PowerShell and automation that you have with you forever. So take pride in that and ownership of the fact that you have control over that skill set.
Absolutely.
All right, we got to dive into some hotkeys and key bindings, because this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Early on in my PowerShell journey, you were so kind to hop on a call with me and show me your screen, and I noticed your cursor was moving perfectly. You weren't moving your mouse, but the cursor was kind of going. I was like, what the heck is going on here? Get us started with some basics of like moving the cursor around. What are some of the go-to keys that people should be pressing to move that around when they're editing code, or even honestly like Word, anytime you have a text field, pretty much?
Well, first of all, there's the arrow keys, right, left, up, down. Those are kind of intuitive for most people. The thing is, you can modify them to work a lot better. For example, control left, right allows you to jump entire words. Control up, down allows you to jump paragraphs. This is not restricted to doing that in your code editor. It works exactly as well in Word or in lots of other tools. So most modern text editors implement them because they just make sense. For example, another great one is on my keyboard, it's the pause one. It might be the home button. This might be a bit different depending on your local keyboard, but most of them use the opposite equally, end or ended. The home button jumps you to the beginning of the line, the end to the end of the line. Control home jumps you to the beginning of the document. Control N jumps you to the end of your document, which is kind of nifty if you were, writing a script, which we usually do from top to the bottom. We need to look something up, and we realize, that was copy some segments out, want to jump to the end we're currently writing, Control N, and that's where you are. Convenient. What you can also usually do is include the Shift key to select things, like Shift position 1 or Shift home, that selects everything from the current position to the beginning of the line. So these are kind of useful for the editor, but spoiler alert, they also work in the PowerShell console in your current input line. It's just that you usually don't have to deal with lengthy documents inside of your console input. But control or pause 1 or end, imagine you writing a command, you want to store the results in a variable, +$1 $R equals, and you have that. So that's already convenient. There are, however, two key bindings I really, really, really want to emphasize when you are living in the console. And the first one is probably the most transformative key binding you can ever learn about. And you won't find any documentation anywhere about that unless you know what you're looking for. And, well, most people just accept the defaults as they are. So whenever in the PowerShell console you use the tab key to cycle through options, you can use Control Spacebar and get a tab menu, which is even better than what the Bash console has.
Fact.
Because in PowerShell, we can now use the arrow keys to select the option, and we can get subtitles, tooltips, extra information as an undertitle for the currently selected option, which in case of parameters, for example, will tell you what kind of data type it expects. In case you get a bit creative about that, because you can define your own tab completion, you can do that for your own commands. You can attach that to other people's commands. You can also provide very useful subtitles. Imagine, for example, you need to select an Azure subscription. That subscription is a GUID, very user-friendly. Of course, I've got all my GUIDs memorized. Now, for those people who don't have quite that eidetic a memory, and my condolences if you do have that, you could, as a subtitle, add the display name of the subscription, maybe even the tenant name as an extra information. If you have the data somehow, which is something you can access with API calls or just the correct command like get AC subscription, you can then, provide that information as part of the tab completion. So Control Spacebar gives you the tab completion, and other key takeaway, you are not forced to live with the defaults. You can define your own tab completion. You can attach it to any command that you care to have that tab completion. That's something to look up if you want to invest into being a bit more productive. Now, The other key binding in the console, and that's a really great one as well, is Control R as in Rudolph or as in reverse search in your input history, which allows you, big surprise, to search in your input history. Now, this key binding is a bit more complex. Now, you hit Control R, you start typing, and it gives you the last match in your history. Then you can hit Control R again to cycle through the current matches. It's nice. But there's a second component we also might want to use, and that is the change our patterns on how we type to match that input history search pattern.
Oh, like as you're typing a command in?
As I type in a command, let's do a quick example. I'm doing a lot of module development. So I frequently need to re-import the latest dev version of the module so I can get things going. Now, I could do import module, whitespace, path to the thing, -force, and that's fine. The problem is, when I do this, is if I now later try to search that in my input history, I start typing import. Import is a verb that other commands do use as well. For example, import PowerShell data file, import CLI XML, import CSV. So this is a bad typing pattern now because it's hard to look up, but it's something that we usually will have to look up during the dev cycle. So I use the alias instead, IPMO path. IPMO is a very unique pattern, so I can instantaneously grab that. Now, not everybody is doing module development, especially if you're beginning, but let's say you're trying to run a script. You can just provide the path to the script if there's no white space in the path. Could be a relative path. Just run a script and you're good. What you can do instead is do an ampersand white space at path. This is going to call the script, same effect, but now you can do control ampersand and you immediately get it because there's no other situation where you would be using ampersand in your input. So that makes it a lot faster to look up things. If you kind of think about what do I need to recall frequently, and then just go ahead and do it. And the third one out of the two key bindings I wanted to highlight, Shift-Enter. When you're in your input in the console and hit Enter, you execute the current line. If you do Shift-Enter, you do multi-line. You get a new line without executing, so you can keep typing. So, classic example. I'm importing my new dev module. Then I need to connect to that service my module is dealing with. And then I need to prepare a certain extra data just to have the latest test set there. So that's 3 lines. If I execute them line by line by line, I now need to look up that all 3 lines one after the other, which either means an orgy of arrow up keep hitting or Control R and searching 3 separate times. If you do Shift Enter and execute all 3 lines in one go, they also become one history entry. So any search is going to grab all 3 lines together.
Yep, that's a really helpful one. I use that a lot whenever I'm working on a module and want to quickly re-import the files for it. And then, definitely a 10 out of 10 recommendation there. Shift Enter.
Yeah, so that's all I want to point out really about the console key bindings, except for one last thing. You can define your own key bindings.
And I think that's the difference between key bindings and hotkeys. Hotkeys are more like system level, whereas key bindings are
system level. Key bindings require you to have the console on focus.
Yeah.
There's this blog post about console experience that I wrote at the PowerShell community blog from the PowerShell team, which covers how to do the custom key bindings, but that's definitely something we can't cover here in a reasonable amount of time. Just, you could be doing whatever. Just for example, I've got an F1 button which will show a help window over the command you're currently selecting. So there's a lot of opportunities what you can do. You can also do a great April's Fool joke by replacing the spacebar with the beep sound.
That might be annoying, or would you?
Yes,
like that?
That's kind of the point when one of my trainees doesn't lock his computer in April 1st. He's kind of asking for it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, well, that covers some good stuff. I like the way that with hotkeys you covered, like, it's really the arrow keys that we're dealing with. We are just supercharging them by pressing other keys as we press the arrow keys. And it's a game changer. Like, as IT professionals, as anyone who works on a computer as part of your job, as your primary input method of data, you should 1,000,000% be comfortable with these hotkeys. I think another one that comes up a lot for me is Control A, select all, just a little different way of going about that. But you really need to be able to navigate through lines quickly with the arrow keys without leaving your keyboard, because that's one less distraction and you could just move so much faster. And also, similar to PowerShell, when you get really comfortable and fluent with these things, it becomes almost like Zen-like. You're kind of in a flow state as you're like navigating your computer, learning stuff, running code, rerunning it, using control space. You know, all these things kind of contribute to at least me staying more in the zone and not getting distracted as much. Yeah.
And another aspect, let's be honest here, if you've got 3 large screens, by the time you found your mouse, you've been faster going with the keyboard anyway, even in regular text editors.
On Windows, what's the hotkey to like invert your monitor? Does that still exist?
I have no idea.
Okay. I think it used to be like Control, Windows, Command, and then like the arrow key. I love that prank. You just do it on somebody's computer and their monitor like shifts sideways.
It's evil, but yes.
I actually just launched. Were you there earlier today whenever I launched the PowerShell pranks repository?
Oh, that one. I might need to add one of the pranks I did love. And that is starting a browser in the system context with a YouTube video with a really annoying song. And then every half second maximize volume and unmute yourself.
Oh, that's good.
And you know, I managed to score that one on a trainee again. I did it with a 5 minutes delay, and literally the boss was right walking past as the machine was starting to, at maximum volume, announce "Haba haba zoot zoot, deba uba zat zat, anam nam."
Oh gosh. I love that. And I know that you fancy a good prank. And in fact, I mean, I'm going to mention it. You can't stop me. But I know a module of yours may have a baked-in Rickroll. It may. I may have seen it with my own eyes. I may not have. Can you confirm or deny this and give us some background on the Rickroll?
Well, yes, Rickroll was... Okay, now I'm not going to start on the full history of Rickroll on that. As
Yeah,
maliciously misinterpreting your request might have been. So there's this thing called EntraAuth. EntraAuth is a PowerShell module to allow you to authenticate to Entra without requiring the MSAL libraries, which is a constant conflict problem between modules. So I tried to get around of all of that. And there are different authentication flows, different ways you can authenticate. And one of them, the default one for I'm a user and I'm sitting in front of the machine and want to log in as myself, at least until the web account manager came around, was going like this. First of all, you go to your console will call up the browser window. And the browser window goes to the authentication screen with your MFA, do whatever you need to prove you are truly you. And once you're done, Entra is going to redirect your browser to a so-called redirect URL, which is then, as part of that redirect request, going to receive the code that you then need to use to do the actual authentication. At that point, I could ignore it, but if you don't do anything, your browser window is now open, and it's loading and loading and loading and loading and getting nowhere. This is confusing. So it's common practice to then, as a final redirect, tell the browser instead, okay, go to that link, which is usually a link to a message that's like, you're authenticated, you can close the tab now, which I do as well. So in like 99 out of 100 cases, that's exactly what's going to happen. There's just this 100th case, which is, where you might accidentally be redirected to a certain YouTube video. Now, there's no technical need for me to do this, of course, but let's be honest, you gotta have some fun while you're doing the job. Otherwise, it's a chore, not your hobby made into a job. So I'm having fun. Sometimes that's extremely subtly hidden. Like I literally implemented a special exception type called the out of beer exception, paired with the beer getting warm exception. Different exception types implemented in C#. If you go in PS Framework, then you can send messages at different levels, like host, verbose, debug, warning. And each of these levels actually has a numeric value. The level warning has a numeric value 666. So I do have fun. I love placing some subtle Easter eggs. I'll admit this one was slightly less subtle than some of the others.
When we get back from this ad break, Fred is going to give us his take on C# as a PowerShell and C# aficionado.
This is the PowerShell Podcast.
Most of you know the PowerShell Podcast is sponsored and made possible by PDQ. I've had questions from listeners asking, what's PDQ and what do you do? Well, we help IT teams automate endpoint management. PDQ Connect is our cloud-based tool for real-time software deployment, patching, scripting, remote access, and vulnerability management. It's fast, flexible, and built for people who just want things to work. If you want to see it in action, head to pdq.com/podcast and check out our interactive demo. No signups, no emails, no credit card, just a fast and easy way to explore how it works. That's pdq.com/podcast. Automated endpoint management that doesn't slow you down.
Now, back to the PowerShell Podcast.
So Fred, we recently had Ryan Coates on for a PowerShell Wednesday, and he did a podcast where he talked about C# a little bit, and as that being kind of a next step once you get proficient with PowerShell. What is your take on C# and how that can sort of pair with PowerShell?
Well, it's obviously extremely and highly synergistic because PowerShell is written in C#. And at the end of the day, if you want to implement native PowerShell elements that go beyond functions, that's where you're stuck at. You might be able to bridge the gap by going for PowerShell classes first, but that hits a limit fairly fast when it comes to things you can actually do in the deep backend engine sides of things. So it's a step you basically never have to do, as in you must do it to get your PowerShell task done. But it is something that gives you extremely deep powers to change the way PowerShell behaves. And that's from extremely simple things to fundamental hacking of the entire PowerShell engine. Two quick examples. When you accept a path for, I want to import the following files, one or multiple, as part of your function, you would usually turn this into a string array parameter. And then inside of your code, you now need to resolve all of the paths, validate that they're correct files, handle the errors, and then use the resolved data to do your actual importing and processing. Now, with fairly limited C# skills, you can instead create your own type, which will do all the resolving, validation inside of the parameter binding, so your code doesn't have to do it. So your function can start with for each file and path. That's a fairly simple thing you can do in C#, which is virtually impossible in script alone. Not fully impossible. This would be something you can actually implement in a PowerShell class, but it would have significantly worse performance and it would take a lot more time. Incidentally, if you want that kind of feature, PS Framework has that. Now, on the other deepest end, all the PowerShell contents, all of the PowerShell content in your current context is stored in something we call scopes. Now, with the C# end of things, you can build an entire wrapper around the scope model and objectify that. So a function could get an object representing its current scope and pass it on to another helper command that is in a different module and usually would not have access to the scope. That is doable. But without C#, that is going to be a trail of blood and tears. Incidentally, that is going to be a feature in the next version of PS Framework. Fundamentally, C# can massively enhance the advanced games and toys you can put into PowerShell. But from my personal observation, it has yet to be a technical necessity you have to do without which you can't get it done. It's just something that is a good tool if you want advanced, complex features that improve quality of life in certain very specific aspects. It's a skill, I would say, yes, is worth getting if you have the time to maintain it. Right. If you're already struggling to get enough hours in your week to do PowerShell, odds are by going also into C#, you'll have trouble maintaining both in a useful manner, and it's a lot more likely that you will be burning time and effort and canceling it at the end because you can't push through. So if let's put it this way: if you feel like you can do about 1 day per week in total with coding, that's like the average assumption, I would say, if you want an about-ish estimate, where it could be worth it if you are feeling kind of blocked in or stalled and they can take your PowerShell. But it is never a necessity. It has proven useful. It also helps in explaining a few patterns and problems that you can encounter on the script side, which are intransparent without that background, especially whenever you hit actually memory issues and certain fun things like the array addition conundrum, the exponentially more expensive growing array addition problem in Windows PowerShell. They fixed that in PowerShell 7.5, but if you're in older versions, especially the built-in one, you should not be adding to arrays if it's going to be more than 1,000 objects. But yeah, it's useful. I have found it to be an extreme expansion of what I can actually do in PowerShell. It is definitely the cause of, let's say, 75% of all the cases of, oh my God, Fred, how the hell do you do something like this? Because with default scripting, you just can't do a few things. And it's weird, but you can do it with C#, but it does not work as well with script. Now, there is one thing I kind of want to point out as well on that, and that is performance. Many people say, hey, okay, no, I'm going to do this in C# because that has better performance. Many dev teams are doing that, including notably at Microsoft. And that has a really clear answer to that, and that is, it depends. C# is extremely performant, extremely more performant than PowerShell in certain areas, makes absolutely no difference in most of the others, and is actually more expensive in some cases. Now, specifically, where is C# the superior option? Whenever you are transforming data within the current process. If you never have to wait on any external resources, if it's basically a math problem, C# is going to beat PowerShell every single time, and not by a small margin. There was, for example, at PSConfEU, this code performance contest, and the winning solutions basically cheated by doing a PowerShell script that compiled C# code that solved the problem. Because the problem was a performance thing within memory, and script code, which is then executed based on C# code, can never beat managed code at that. So that's definitely the use case for where C# gains significant performance. For most of the network call related things, anything that leaves a current process, C# is not going to make a damn dent in the workload. Whenever we do a network request, whenever we do an invoke command to some remote computer, whenever we do invoke REST method or the C# equivalent to some REST API, most of the time spent is on waiting on the other side to finish. And at that point, whether we wait in PowerShell or we wait in C# doesn't matter.
So you got to find the right use case.
Yeah. And there's this last thing where PowerShell is actually a lot faster. And that is whenever we deal with data serialization. PowerShell doesn't have to care about restoring specific data types. It just gives you a custom object with the properties on it, and that's it. If your C# site now wants to do a proper typization with converting the REST response into the correct data types, you're spending quite a bit of time building objects and specific classes you didn't have to build. So, at that point, PowerShell wins.
Boom. Have you written any projects in C# on GitHub?
Oh, totally. My string module is almost fully C# based.
Why?
Because these are commands that convert strings within memory. It's a pure in-memory conversion. It's basically the string operators as commanded, so you can put them in a pipeline.
Interesting.
And that's...
What's it called?
A string.
String?
Yes.
How do we get it?
Like the data type.
How do we get it? We want it.
It's install module string.
Not install PS resource?
No, actually, ideally, if you're already wanting specialized commands, you should be using install PSF module.
I know you've added some functionality to that. It's pretty helpful.
I like to think so. There are new versions coming up. I have 4 weeks of vacation coming up, and most of that is going to be spent on PowerShell Pro.
What does it address that PS Resource Get is maybe lacking currently?
How do I best put it? It solves the gap with parameterization between the two, first of all, which is something. The next release is going to address a few problems with PS Resource Get. First of all, the next version of PS Framework.NuGet, which provides the install PSF module command, is going to actually support installing dependencies on NuGet v3 repositories, which PS Resource Get does not.
What does it do? It just added for V2 or something like that? That was the kind of big addition?
Currently in PS Resource Get, you have to register the repository at a V2 NuGet level in order to get the dependencies. And that only works if the repository actually supports NuGet v2, which admittedly Azure DevOps Artifacts does, but not every host does. And there you pay a performance penalty from that. One of the key features of NuGet v3 is that they have a lot better scaling for read operations. While in NuGet v2 protocol, you have to have full mirrors for everything as a server, and that adds a lot of overhead and limits performance.
Fair enough.
So we actually do want v3, and PS Framework.NuGet is going to offer that. It's also going to stop one bad behavior I absolutely hate in PS Resource Get. Then you install a module with PS Resource Get and it has dependencies. And your module declares the dependency as at least the following version. piece resource get is going to install exactly that least version, not the latest one.
Rather than the latest.
Yes, which is a horrible design decision, in my opinion, because I'm looking at the security side. So a dependency can update to the latest version, and the customer is still going to get the insecure version because the module taking the dependency on my module that I'm trying to keep secure is not updating.
And when we create the modules, we're able to specify if it's a minimum version or if it's just this particular version, right?
Yes, we can specify that. And if we have the latest version of the dependency installed, we import module. Import module is going to pick the latest version. It's just the install piece resource that is not going to install the latest version to begin with. So I'm kind of annoyed with that. Other than that, what Piece Framework to NuGet already can do is remote installation to offline machines, which Piece Resource Get is never going to do. And what we can also do is we can offer return objects on each module, including the dependency. When you install Piece Resource, it just completes and that's it. You don't know what changed. You don't even know what dependencies were involved.
So there's no pass-through kind of thing.
There's no pass-through. There is no feedback that tells you what exactly happened. And it can serve as a validation that actually you installed the correct one instead of, for example, a typo squatter.
Yeah.
With install PSF module, you get that list.
And what's that module called if people want to get started with this?
PSFramework.NuGet.
PSFramework.NuGet. Awesome. And you talked earlier about EntraAuth, which is your module. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it handles federated credentials?
Sure. And thank you for bringing it up because that's kind of the latest, greatest features there. So essentially, I'm trying to re-implement the authentication flows, the ways to authenticate that are available for PowerShell against Android. Same as what the Microsoft.graph authentication module offers, the same the AC.accounts module offers, the kind of like the different ways you can do that in a convenient way without using the underlying Microsoft authentication libraries, MSAL. Problem with that is that in PowerShell, especially in Windows PowerShell, we only can have one version of a DLL file loaded at a time, which means multiple modules get into conflict all the time, and you are hard-pressed to write a script that is using multiple official Microsoft modules. Also, they are a lot larger. If you're trying to install the full graph toolkit, you've got 1 gigabyte, or 2 if you want beta and V1. EntraAuth is a few kilobytes. So there's that. I also wanted a native PowerShell client that others can build a dependency on, and a convenient request handler, token handler, and it does all of that. So no matter how you want to authenticate for the regular flows, EntraAuth is trying to do that. It can't handle all scenarios. MSAL is done by a fully powered team doing nothing but MSAL. I'm doing this on my own whenever I can fit in the time, so I can't actually do all of the bells and whistles, but honestly, PowerShell doesn't need all the bells and whistles. It just needs the PowerShell relevant flows, and it can't handle all of the security hardening scenarios that you can actually enforce, but for most common day scenarios, it works just fine, and especially in all unattended scenarios. With a service account, it works exactly as the official ones. And that's where the latest feature comes in, federated credentials. Let's say you're trying to set up an automation account to run some graph requests, some script which is going to require some graph requests. Now, it needs to authenticate in some way. And essentially, there are 2 ways to go about that. First of all, we can assign the rights to do everything it needs to the automation account itself. It is a managed identity. It is a service account in Entra, and we can assign permissions to that. Problem, there is no user interface way to do so. You need to run a specific PowerShell API call for that. I've got a module for that as well, different story, not going into that. But essentially, you can do it like this. Problem is, in addition to it being user-unfriendly to set up, it also doesn't mesh well with the established management flows and practices and workflows that we have, especially in larger organizations. It would be the best option because there's no secret involved an attacker can steal in this. So whenever you can do managed identity authentication, -identity, do it. It's great. Now, the alternative to that is you set up an app registration, configure the scopes, the permissions you need on that, and then log in through the service principal that is linked to that app registration. So you provide a client ID, a tenant ID, and then you need to provide some evidence that you're allowed to use this. And there are 3 ways to do that. Option 1, a client secret. That's basically a password, which you then send to Entra. That's basic authentication. You send your secret through the network until it reaches Entra. Don't do that. Option 2, certificate. You have a certificate with a private key. You register the public key of Entra, and then you use the private key to sign the authentication request, which means your secret never leaves your machine, which is a lot better than the client secret flow. That works. Again, however, we have in both cases the problem that if the attacker at one point compromises the secret, they can now steal the secret and use it on their own machine without us noticing a thing, other than authentication logs for the service principal. But if they're not doing anything particular, for example, just reconnaissance, you might never notice. Which leads us to federated credential. Federated credential is the last option. And the federated credential, we say, okay, we pass on the burden of proving the identity to another identity service. And we just believe them when they tell us that's true, which is where the federated comes in. What this, for example, means is that you can have a GitHub action, like a build pipeline in GitHub Actions, which can authenticate as its managed identity to GitHub. Not to Entra, to GitHub. And the access token we get from the GitHub identity provider, from the GitHub authentication service, becomes the secret we send to Entra. And on the Entra side, we configure specifically what makes that identity correct, like what of identity provider, what needs to be on that access token and this token they send us, that we believe that it's the correct identity on the other side. Which in case of GitHub Actions would mean for federated credentials, we can specify the exact branch that the pipeline must be running under. And one of the options we can do for this is we can specify as the other identity provider to be Entra, in which case we can do identity authentication without needing to configure any specific scopes as our automation account, and use the identity authentication token as the access token for the federated credential, which on the one hand means we no longer have a secret that can be stolen. We get the benefit of managed identity. And last one, nothing in that statement requires the automation account to be in the same tenant as the application that we're trying to authenticate to. So if you have got multiple tenants, let's say you've got an automation account running in your production tenant, you can authenticate to your dev tenant or your quality assurance tenant without needing any configuration, any policies, anything that gets in the way. You just click on federated credential, toggle it on, and you're good to go. Okay, fill in the necessary IDs, of course.
Nice. EntraAuth. Check it out.
And it never expires. So whenever you can, use identity authentication. Whenever you can't do that, if you can, do federated. If it's an unattended flow and not something you're doing as a regular user.
Dang. Impactful. I'm taking it in right now, to be honest with you. I think there's several people out there cheering to themselves in their car as they listen to you say that, as you probably solve some problem they're running into. But the identity space, it's an important one. That is for sure.
It is.
Now, I want to talk to you about PowerShell Conference Europe. Because actually, it was a month ago at the time of us recording this, maybe a month and a half by the time this goes live. But I don't think I've actually talked about how it was for me on the podcast. And I have not talked to you about how it was for you because you were there as well. We got to see each other and spend some good time together. But let's talk about PowerShell Conference Europe. What was your experience like?
It was a blast, like every single PSConfEU. Each of them is a bit unique, especially since we started moving to a different city each time. Originally, when the PSConfEU first started, we were always in Hanover, which was nice, but at some point you kind of knew the city. So moving around has led to some very interesting experience, and I found every single hosting country had its very own flair that I appreciated so far. So Malmö, again, was absolutely awesome. And it's kind of the small things. I rarely go there with a full tourist plan and traveling the country after the conference is done or before the conference. I'm basically there for the conference because I simply don't have the time. It's kind of busy season for me. And well, I travel a lot on the job, live in Germany mostly. I've been to the US a lot. I've been to a few other countries quite frequently. And this was my first time in Sweden. And I found some of the cultural differences interesting and some of the hotel experiences interesting. For example, I never knew what everything you could do with crackers at the breakfast table. Before they were kind of like, okay, there's this one thing for people who are allergic to everything. Poor thoughts. Here's your cracker. Go and survive. But there's so many different kinds and different dips, and what? What's happening here?
Are you a cracker lover now?
When I go to Sweden, definitely and for sure.
Yeah.
I might also try to get some of them imported because some of them, especially the peppery ones, were amazing.
Really?
Yeah, I really love that. So culinary, interesting experience. And I will admit, since I'm attending whenever I can both PowerShell Summit and PSConfEU, the food is kind of one of my key complaints about the PowerShell Summit when I compare it to the PSConfEU. It's a different experience, different content between the two, but the food, sorry, there's a clear winner there. Which, again, they proved this time around as well. It was amazing. Too bad I couldn't attend the summit to see this year's comparison because there were improvements last time I was there. But yeah, it's fun. I also very much enjoyed the hanging out with complete strangers at the breakfast table and the food table. One of the things I always do whenever I can manage it is I just find some random conference attendees I don't already know for breakfast and lunch, just to have some random conversation encounters and meet new people. And then usually there's this thing happening in many of those cases that everybody else already knew me, and we already talked at one of the previous conferences because there's so many people coming again and again, and I just forgot about it, which is always kind of embarrassing, but I have a lousy people memory, and for some weird reason, people keep remembering me. So there's that part.
We had ice cream together, right?
I'm pretty sure we had ice cream together, yes.
We definitely did. We were walking the streets of Malmö, eating ice cream together, very shamelessly, might I add.
I regret nothing.
Truly delicious, truly glorious. It was a very fun experience, and I definitely agree with you. Like, getting to meet new people is one of the best things about the conference because you'll find you have so much in common. Maybe they use your thing. I know I met a lot of people who've listened to the podcast a bunch, and I've never met them before, so it was really cool to be able to meet people who sort of already know you. Maybe they use your projects too. And I'm sure you met some users. Constantine comes to mind as a PS Framework user that you might know and have talked to.
I did, and I know. And there's quite a few others, yes.
Oh, yeah.
There's also something I want to talk about for the audience here. Whether it's PowerShell Summit or PSConfEU, there's one common assumption that I encounter when I tell people, why don't you go there? The usual misassumption I always encounter is like, no, my PowerShell game isn't there yet. And I feel like a noob. No. You won't. There's so many friendly people, and not everybody can be a level 500 deep dive nerd. There's so many people who just are from a small or medium company who are like the only PowerShell person in their organization. And they finally get to meet with other people who are enthusiastic about it, who are interested about it. The only thing you have to bring along for the conference is enthusiasm about PowerShell. Everything else, including skill level, is optional. I literally spent one lunch break at a PSConfEU. I think it was a PSConfEU. It's been a few years. But I explained somebody what the while loop is. And that was fine. It was having a great time. It's about getting to know people and about getting inspired. If you were just there for the session content, you could just wait a few weeks and watch the recordings on YouTube, or months. But this time around, weeks, because they're extremely fast about releasing all of those videos.
Very fast.
So absolutely, enthusiasm is the only requirement. Do come. It's a great place. It's a great time. It's awesome people. And if you need a sales pitch for that, it's pretty much the cheapest PowerShell training you can get.
Yeah, and it really helps you level up. And I think you really spoke to something that people out there may need to hear, and that's that you don't need to be a PowerShell expert to be part of the community. People who are at Fred's level are more than happy to interact with people on all skill levels, right? You might have experienced something else. It doesn't really matter. We're all here to learn and share about PowerShell. And if there's only experts, there's not a lot of people to teach, right? So it's really beneficial to the community to have those beginner perspectives. So please bring them.
Absolutely.
And you've seen so many people grow, right? I know maybe yes. I'm an example of that for you. People you give a little bit of help to, you kind of guide them along the way. Maybe they check out a good talk of yours, and all of a sudden they're kind of contributing in their own way.
Yeah, it's really uplifting for me to see that happen. You're a really great example for that, by the way. But there are others. I give a lot of trainings as part of my job. Seeing those people grow and getting the enthusiastic feedback forms is always a highlight for me. And, seeing some of them come to the conference, some of them being speakers by now, it's great. It's great fun as well. On the topic of speaking, though, there's this one issue I keep having and not really regretting at conferences. Well, one of the aspects about, being Fred is that I do a lot of PowerShell on the job because I managed to con people to make me basically do PowerShell full-time and getting paid for it, which is great. But it also means I have a lot of content that I can do presentations about. I have a lot in my backpack of presentations I gave somewhere internally or just for one customers, which have never seen the light of day, which I can then bring to a conference. And I have done so many presentations internally and publicly that I'm fairly relaxed about, doing this extra session. So one of my particular experiences for PSConfEU is I barely managed to attend any sessions because I was busy preparing all the extra sessions that came up, because one of the things I usually offer to Rob and the crew is that I do extra sessions for whenever they have a speaker canceling or some short-term emergency and they've got a slot to fill. So it turns out this time around I did 4 sessions in total instead of the usual 2, so I had to talk every single day.
I think the last minute one that you might have got added to was like packed room.
I had fairly good rooms on all of them, yes.
Fred.
Which works well for me. That's part of it, I'm assuming. At least I had a few people who basically told me straight to my face they came for the comedy, and the content was kind of optional. So I'm happy about that feedback as well. It means I'm semi-entertaining at the very least.
I'd say so.
But there's also a certain part of that is the session selection this time around. My 2 key sessions that were selected were about advanced error handling and designing commands for the pipeline. And one of the key aspects to those 2 sessions compared to a wide range of the other ones is that they were basically instant win sessions. Many of the sessions you're seeing are kind of inspirational in nature. You go to them, you get inspired, you get new ideas, but it takes a lot more effort after the conference to get that applied to your problems, to get that into production release. to gain some actual graspable benefit out of it. And at least the error handling one is a topic that every single person has on every single code they write. Every single attendee. So I was not surprised that the error handling session was completely full up and people were kind of annoyed that the room was full. That was kind of expected. And for designing commands for the pipeline, similar story. The pipeline is pretty much omnipresent in our console, but not half as much as it should be in our script code. But it's, again, a phenomenon that everybody has to deal with. So it's something that gives you like an instant win, something you can immediately apply to your code. And we have in PSConfEU from a topic selection, usually not that much of that kind of content, which is, I think, an interesting contrast between PowerShell Summit and PSConfEU. If you check the agenda, like what kind of sessions have the majority? At PowerShell Summit, you have a lot very PowerShell tool building specific content, module building, templating, core PowerShell techniques, which is useful, which is in many cases immediately useful and applicable to your problems. While PSConfEU, I found, has more inspirational topics, more broad-ranging applied in the field topics, which is great if you have got that kind of problem, and which is great to get some inspiration on things that you might not get to do right now, but might be useful in the future and might get just to offer some ideas and get a wider range of connections than you would usually get. So different flavor there, but given that the sessions they took for me were mostly focused on the core PowerShell aspects there, the formal 2 ones they gave, I wasn't surprised that I had high attendance there. And the other 2, well, one of them was EntraAuth authentication, again, a problem which is fairly broadly applicable.
Yep.
And the other one, package management, getting modules installed on machines, again, broadly applicable. So worked out this time for me, but especially the 2 last-minute ones meant that I was kind of rushing to get all of my sessions covered and the PowerPoints properly branded for PSConfEU. Never mind that I failed 2 times about that, but different story. So, yeah, it was great, but I was kind of running ragged by the end of like day 4.
Yeah, I agree. Just the social battery for me, it's, I work from home most of the time, so being in person is way different. There's a lot more talking every day. I guess I talk on this, which sort of counts. But I, 4 hours of socializing, after the conference at least, and during the day and during lunches and stuff, it adds up to be a lot. But for me, that's also the most helpful bit, is I get to meet people who are using PowerShell maybe in different ways than I am, maybe in different ways than I've thought about, who maybe are subject matter experts on things that I don't actually currently touch. But now all of a sudden I have a friend who is an expert in some kind of backup thing that I don't currently use and may never use, but I know them.
Absolutely. And it also helps, let's be honest here, that most of the attendees are introverts. So all of us kind of have an understanding at some point somebody just has enough and can't do anymore.
Yep.
For me, it helps a lot that I usually have a role. I'm really bad if I'm just part of the crowd and don't have any guidance, anything to focus on. But that's not a problem at company events because I'm the office barkeeper, which gives me a role during the company events. And it's not a problem at PowerShell conferences because I'm, speaking, or I'm, taking on the role of bragger about my toys. I've ambushed some innocent victims and then, go and brag about my toys, which, again, gives me something to focus on, gives me a role, and people kind of are aware by now that you should be aware of strangers with long beards that talk about PS Framework. So you can't really say people weren't warned.
I remember eating dinner at the community party, and I was sitting there with a couple friends, and I looked down to the right, and I see you surrounded by about 5 people, just preaching the good word about PS Framework, and they were eating it up. That's just Fred in natural habitat. It really was. Do you remember? Did you even see me, or were you so locked in?
Again, what?
Did you see me, or were you so engaged?
Oh, I was focused on my victims.
Okay.
So I kind of was involved there. It was glorious. I had a great time.
I think you were talking about NuGet stuff. PSFramework.NuGet, if I recall correctly.
PSFramework.NuGet and PSFramework, both of those.
I'm really good at eavesdropping.
That's they solve problems.
Yes.
Thank you for emphasizing both. Yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to add about your PSConfEU experience?
I don't know whether it's about directly my own experience, but another aspect about all of the conference thing, really. And that is, don't be afraid of submitting.
Yeah.
Doing a session is totally worth it, amongst other things. That gives you a free ticket for the rest of the show. And all you have to do is 1 or 2 sessions, depending on PowerShell Summit or PSConfEU. PowerShell Summit are okay with you submitting only 1 session. PSConfEU, they want at least 2 of them, which, of course, is more of a problem because now you have to figure out 2 talks. Now, for anybody who's even barely willing to consider this, think about that. You've solved a problem. You've got something to tell about. The odds are other people are facing similar problems. And your approach on how you solved your problem is going to be helpful. You don't have to be like a PowerShell all-star in order to stand on stage there. You don't have to have perfect speaking skills to be on stage there. All of us, just keep in mind, every single attendee, you can assume, has suffered through a 3-hour training with a speaker in a horrible Indian dialect, barely understandable, who's in a that voice, that monologue talking about his topic, and we are glad we get subtitles because we understand that. Everybody is going to be understanding that you might be nervous, you might fumble a few words, you might not be the most charismatic superstar on screen. Doesn't matter. You've got something to share, go ahead and risk it. It's worth it. The worst they can tell you is no. And that's, let's be honest, that's a risk you always have, but it's also not the end of the world. And if they didn't take your talk this time, you can recycle the same submission to the next conference.
Maybe learn something too, get some feedback.
With a few upgrades, get some feedback. Now, if you're considering speaking, there are a few pieces of advice I really want to give. First of all, you can get a very easy start, just trying things out by, speaking at a PowerShell user group. There's quite a few of those around, and they don't ask you for your session because they don't know about you. Offer them the session. Reach out to them. Most of them are friendly folks. You can find them on the PowerShell Discord. You can find some of them on Twitter. You can find some of them on Blue Sky, Mastodon, or whatever your preference of reaching out is.
You can reach out to me. I always need speakers, PowerShell Wednesdays. Just saying. That
as well, yes. So you don't have to start on a big stage with lots of people, with the PowerShell team in attendance. With heck, if you risk speaking at a PowerShell Summit, the very inventor of PowerShell himself might be in your audience. And spoiler, smiling benignly and being happy about other people being happy about his toys. He's a great guy. To this day, my assumption is that the PowerShell community is the way it is because none of us dare disappoint Jeffrey because of the example he set, or would be a kind and friendly person. Yep. That being said, don't be afraid, but you can practice. You can speak at a user group. You can speak at a smaller circle to get started there. Now, from speaking at sessions at a PSConfEU, there's one big issue. There's the session limit. You need to have at least 2 sessions that get picked. So if you want to have a reasonable success about getting chosen as a speaker, try to submit 3 sessions, even if one of them is not quite as optimal as you'd like it to be. Also keep in mind that you can actually keep working on the content after your sessions get picked, which will then guide you if you submitted 3, which 2 of them you actually want to develop more. Why? Basically, when the session selection team picks which session they want, they categorize them. There's no point in having 5 separate sessions on how to do PowerShell scripts in automation accounts. is at best a slot for one of them. So 4 of those 5 sessions would not get picked. And the same happens in lots of different categories. We don't know what category exactly they pick. But here's the thing. They don't just pick by category. They also pick a certain set of sessions based on speaker. As an organizer, they need to get new speakers, because if we only have the same 10 speakers on stage or 20 speakers on stage, we kind of kill our own next generation. We need new speakers, because old speakers will at some point stop being speakers. And if there's nobody to step up, well, game over. So they want some fresh blood, but they also have to sell those tickets. And let's just say, if Chrissy Lemaire is submitting 2 sessions, she gets picked. End of story. If Jaap Brasser submits sessions, he gets picked. I'm kind of optimistic about my own nature in that calculation. On the other hand, as a long-term speaker, I also am a firm believer in that the moment you take your speaking slot for granted, you stop deserving that speaking slot. So I'm trying to keep up with the game and putting effort into those abstracts that I'm submitting and everything. But here's the thing. If you only submit 2 sessions, and one of those sessions collides with a blockbuster talk, you're out. That's it, game over.
So basically just submit a lot of sessions.
Ideally, try to go at least for free. More than 3 for a first-time speaker is, let's be honest, not realistic. But trying to get that 3rd session submitted significantly improves your chances to get picked.
Yeah. And then I guess worst case, whatever talks you come up with, pitch those to user groups as well. And it can still be a win for you. Doing any kind of talk for the first time is going to be more experience to you to prove to you that you can do it. But the first step is kind of putting those abstracts together.
Yep.
Yep.
And well, that's one of my key recommendations. Go ahead and try it. Try to submit, try to figure out. It doesn't have to be the deepest of deep dive topic. If you're watching PSConfEU recording from Bruce Payette talking about his braids tool, don't take that as a yardstick of what you have to deliver. That's the kind of session I attend when I want my brain to melt. It's fun. It's great. I take a few like what the hell moments with, and I can somewhat understand what he's doing there, but don't assume that those absolutely super-powered deep dive sessions are the yardstick that you need to measure your sessions by. We also need entry-level stuff. We also need something that is more accessible. Inspiring is great, but we also want to take some takeaways with. And, well, the worst thing that could happen to you is have a great PowerShell time. So it's good.
Boom. Well, Fred, thank you for joining me for another episode of the PowerShell Podcast, your weekly podcast all about PowerShell community tools and just fun, honestly. It's been so cool to see the little community we're building here grow, in terms of their careers, not in terms of numbers so much, but just seeing people have that light bulb moment and to sort of be able to play a role in that and see that. It's just one of the best things about the PowerShell community, in my opinion. But Fred, thank you for your wisdom, and to everyone at PowerShell Conference Europe that I got to meet for the first time. You have known you online for a while. It was fantastic meeting you. Want to give a special shout out to Robin Gustafsson, who I was very fortunate enough to meet at the community dinner. Turns out, he's listened to the podcast a bunch. We ended up becoming good friends, went out to dinner a couple times, and it was a fantastic week all around. Thanks to the PSConfEU team for having me out there. It really was a glorious experience. I wish I could go back, and I guess I can next year. PSConfEU will be in Germany next year, which kind of like your home turf.
It's going to make travel easier for me.
Can imagine.
Hope you can make it. It was great. It will be great again.
And I will have
you over for this podcast.
Yes, my pleasure, my friend. And I will have links to all the projects you mentioned and your socials if people want to kind of keep in touch of what Fred's working on. I will have links to all of that in the show notes below. Fred, as always, great talking to you, my friend. Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.